Hi, Roger Linn here, and I'm going to talk in this video about our new 2.1.0 software for LinnStrument or the smaller LinnStrument 128. The first feature is note animations, and what this does is it has a number of sparkly little animations that emanate out from your touch. And the way you select these is it has to do with the way that formerly in the software, if you'd select a note, it would show the same pitches on other rows. Well, now the default is that when you select a note, it only plays the note that you're touching. The reason for that is that the other way was it had a tendency to obscure the note lights too much. And so you can still select that mode, but it's no longer default. Anyway, here's how you select the note animation. You press per split settings, and then in the color column, the third row down is played, where you press on that, and then you are able to select from a number of animations. The first is cell, where it lights only the cell. The next one is same, where it lights the same pitch on other rows, just as in past versions of the software. But here's where it gets fun. The third one is cross. Now, if you press a note, the animation will emanate from your touch. And what's fun is if you touch it lightly, low velocity, it's slow. If you hit it hard, it's faster. Now, the other thing is if I change my finger pressure, it loops the animation. So the speed of the animation is responsive to both velocity and pressure. Let's try some other ones. Let's go to circle. Now in this case, circles emanate. Circles of increasing radius. And by the way, this is polyphonic. Here is the next one, which is square. Same thing, except a square. The next one is diamonds. After that comes star. And the other one the next one after that is sparkles, and that's my favorite. And particularly if I turn that to a different color, white. Sparkles I like because the duration that each light is lit is much shorter, so it's kind of like a sparkler. And in white, it kind of looks like the sparkles off a fireworks sparkler. But I like that, as I say, because the duration of each lit note is so short that it doesn't obscure the note light so much. So after that is curtain. Following that is blinds. And following that is targets. Then we have up. And then correspondingly, we have down, left, and right, where the lights go off from one of four directions from where you touch. Then finally, we have orbits. And by the way, as you can see from the light up here, these are independently set for the left and right splits. You can have two different animations going on at once. Right? So I'm going to set that back to cell, which is the default, and then move on to the next feature, which is switch assignments. And these are the assignments for the two panel switches and the two foot switches that are connected through the dual foot switch jack, which can also be used with a single foot switch. So to get to those, I press Global Settings, and then in the Assign switch area, I select the switch that I wish to assign. In this case, I'm going to assign the switch 1 on the panel. So I'm going to assign that first of all to tap tempo, because it is in tap tempo where all these hidden settings are for these new modes. So now switch 1 is assigned to tap tempo, and if I hold tap tempo, I can change what that cell's assignment is. By default, it's tap. If I go one over, we now have legato. So I'm going to show you what that does. If I turn on switch 1 now in legato mode, on this pluck string sound I've just selected, it's now going to terminate each note when I hit the next note. Now what's interesting though is it's also legato for chords. The next assignment is latch, and what this has to do with is latching notes for the arpeggiator. So let's set the arpeggiator settings to just straight arpeggiation of, whoops, there's something there, of 16th notes. And so I turn the arpeggiator on. Now normally I would have to hold down notes within the chord to arpeggiate them. But if I turn on latch, then I can just press the notes individually. Now that's especially useful if you're using it assigned to a foot pedal. So let's go to the next assignment, which is preset up, preset down. All this does is the same thing as selecting a preset in the preset screen. It just sends the next higher program, MIDI program change message or next lower message. Then after that, we've got PCH, abbreviation for pitch. Now this one's a fun one. What this does is invert temporarily the state of the pitch X on, which allows you to either have smooth pitch slides or stepped pitch slides. So right now it's turned on, but if I reverse the state of pitch, which I have assigned to pitch 1, to switch 1, now, so this is particularly handy if you assign it to a foot switch. That way what you can do is when you want occasionally, you can do continuous slides, and then just pressing on the foot switch would change it to, or I can do that as a momentary switch here. So that's a handy one too. And let's see what we've got next. Well, there are actually 3 more which are only available to the 2 foot switches, and they are sequencer start stop, and for the sequencer you have 4 sequences for each split, and what it'll do, it'll either allows you to select the next higher, the next sequence of the 4, or the previous of the 4. So it allows you with foot switches to move between the 4 sequences used for each split in the sequencer. So that is the foot switch assignments. So I'll set that back to normal. In this case, it would be sustain. Yes. And so the next feature is, oh, actually, this is also in the foot switch assignments and panel switch assignments. 2 of the assignments printed on the panel are sustain and CC65. Now, sustain pedal is control change number 64 in the MIDI specification, and CC65 is just the one after that. There are, of course, 128 different control change assignments or control change messages. So what this does now is if you hold either sustain or CC65, you can adjust the control change number that's sent to anything in the range. Let me set that back to 64. And the same thing if I want to assign CC65, same deal. And as with all these hidden settings, if it's set to something other than the defaults, then the light changes to a different color. So that's that. And let's see, next case is we have, this two features have to do with the tuning of the rows and columns. The first one is negative row offsets. Now previously, in the row offset selection, if you wanted, you could either select one of these selections, which are the more common ones, +3, +4, +5, 6, 7, or octave, or guitar, or no overlap. But previously, you could select octave, and if you held it, you could select any row interval from 0 up to 16. And you can still do that, but if you go down below 0, you can have now negative row offsets all the way down to -16. And if you go farther, you have minus guitar. So what this allows you to do is to have the high notes in the bottom and the lower notes above that. So in this particular case, I've got guitar tuning inverted with the high string down here and the lower strings down there. So I'm going to set that back to normal fourths tuning. And now the next feature that's related to that is mirrored pitch directions. Now previously there was and still is, a setting called left-handed mode. If you go into global settings and you press this fourth button from the bottom, then you'd be able to have pitch increasing from left to right, from right to left, excuse me. Right? And you can still do that, but some people said, wouldn't it be nice if I could have the pitch moving out to the left on the left split increasing, and on the right split moving up increasing in that direction? So you can do that. If you hold this left-handed mode, then you have three options: reverse, which reverses the pitch direction for both splits, or reverse left only, or reverse right only. So let's just say we select reverse left. And then what I'll do is turn on the split, and I have so you get reversed pitch direction. Now, had I selected reverse right, then I'd get them increasing toward center. So that's an interesting thing. To be able to have this symmetrical layout is something that some instruments have experimented with, and you might find that to be useful. So what let's do is to change that back to normal. I'll take off the pitch direction mode and turn off the split as well, and move off to the next feature. In this case now, you are now able to use the low row or the CC faders to send not only control change data as it was before, but also to optionally send channel pressure data. So let me give an example of that. If in per split settings I set the low row to CC1, which sends this, turns the low row essentially into a mod wheel, I can now change the control change number that's sent as you could before, but if I go all the way to the right, I can select channel pressure. And so now moving that low row will send channel pressure information proportional to my position. Now the same thing is true for the XYZ option of low row, which is a three-dimensional pitch strip or control strip on the bottom. In this case, as before, you could select any CC that you want for the X, Y, and Z dimensions of this control strip, but now you can also optionally for each one send channel pressure in the same assignment way that I described before. So let's turn that off. And then last but not least, this applies to CC faders. So if I want to assign CC faders is the mode where you're able to have one of the two splits act as 8 horizontal control change faders, CC faders, assigned each one of those to any CC you want. But now the added option is that if you hold this down for the assignment, you can now select any CC, and if you go all the way to the right, you can assign it to channel pressure as well. So that's that feature. And let's now turn off the CC faders and move on to the next issue. And that is, y-axis relative mode. Now, previously, in the y-axis, you're sending, let me change this to a different sound. In the y-axis, normally it's absolute. If I press down at the bottom of the cell, I'm going to get a y-axis value of close to 0. And if I press to the top of the cell, I'm going to get one close to 127. But there's always been this relative mode where if you turn this on in the first split settings timbre Y column, it would then always start by ascending the middle of the range. So it would always start by ascending 64. However, some people said, wouldn't it be great if in that relative mode I could start setting it from 0 or 127 or something like that. And so now, if in first split settings timbre Y column relative, if you hold that notepad, you're now able to set the starting value for relative mode. So if I wanted it to start at 0, let's say, for example, I wanted to use it for adding a modulation. Well, now it'll start by sending 0 for the y-axis, and then any positive movement in the backward direction will increase it. And that is relative mode. Now let's see, next we have, oh, this is a nice one. The step sequencer previously only responded to start and stop and continue commands and tempo, but it did not respond to song position pointer messages. And what this is useful for is following the start position of your external DAW and then having an instrument sequencer follow that perfectly. Now, before it required that you always start at the beginning or at some even bar boundary. But now that it reads song position pointer information, you can now fast forward or rewind to any position within your song in your DAW, start your DAW, and this will play in perfect sync within the correct position it would have been had it started at the beginning of the song. And let's see. Oh, here's another nice feature. Not that big a deal, but nice. You know, in LinnStrument's MIDI mode, there's one channel, channel per note, and channel per row. And the way channel per row works is it allows you to assign a contiguous block of 8 MIDI channels, such that if you each row sends on its own MIDI channel. So, for example, I have them now set so it uses channels 1 through 8. So the bottom row would be 1, the next row would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, someone pointed out that some guitar synthesizer sound generators prefer to have channel 1 on the high string. So channel 1 would be the high E, channel 2 would be the B string, etc. as you move downward. And that is important because in the sound generators you want them to have a slightly different tone for each of the strings. So now what it does is if I select channel per row, but if I further hold it down, it'll turn to the accent color, and that means that the order of the rows is reversed. So now if I play it, channel 1 will be up here, channel 2 is below that, channel 3 is below that, channel 4, etc. Descending instead of ascending. So that's a nice little feature. Let's set this back to where it was. And oh, here's a handy feature too. If I have the, right now the global settings light is blinking in quarter notes at the current tempo. It's actually doing that because it's receiving sync. But were I to stop sending sync, it would go off and the turn off. And then the problem with that was that sometimes when people were playing the arpeggiator from the internal tempo, they would not see this blinking light. And so now if you have the arpeggiator on, then even if you're not syncing to an external source, this will still blink, and it gives you a nice clue to what the tempo is, and therefore how fast your arpeggiation will be. Let's see. And one more thing is that and this is the last important feature, of the 4 all settings memories that exist on the right side of the preset screen, formerly they would remember everything except the state of the split switch. So now they remember that as well, giving you full recognition of all, full recall of all settings in the machine. Now there are a few other things in there. There's bug fixes and there's some minor improvements, but those are the basic important ones. And if you'd like to update your machine to version 2.1.0, you just go to the LinnStrument support page and then click the button that says Updating OS, and you can it gives you instructions on how to update your machine. So That's the new version 2.0 update, and I hope you like it. And thank you very much for owning LinnStrument.